Welcome, Jennifer. Welcome, Katie. Thank you so much for being here today. Very excited to hear your thoughts on Fireside Chat topic, which is best practices for strategic planning in the social services industry. Setting the vision and strategy for an organization is a critical part of achieving your mission and outcomes. Before diving into best practices agencies should adhere to when planning, I'd like to start us off with defining strategic planning. How do each of you define strategic planning?
I define it as a written document that provides a roadmap for an organization. There should be measurable, specific goals that look out at least on a 3-year horizon. And it is a way for an organization to identify where they want to go and how they're going to get there.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is really starting with the end in mind and then working backwards. So you can align the team on where you're headed, get everyone rowing in the same direction, and then build out backwards from there.
Fantastic. Why is it critical to have a strategic plan in place for social services agencies specifically?
Yeah, I think a big piece is really the team component and to make sure that everyone knows how to prioritize their work appropriately and that you're making the right decisions as a leadership team as well. It's really easy to kind of get moving in the day-to-day and respond to what's coming at you. But if you don't take that moment to take a step back, make sure you're thinking about where the organization needs to be going, and do you have the right people in place, in the right roles, working on the right things. It's really easy to lose track of where you need to be. And so having everyone on the same page makes it easier in their day-to-day as well. So when they're faced with, hey, do I respond to this thing that came up, or do I focus on this other thing that we've decided as a priority? When you've agreed on what the roadmap is, it makes it easier for everyone in the organization to make those decisions without having to flag it up the pole every time.
I agree, and I would really just add that it's an opportunity to take a look at the environment in which you're working and also your defined service population to make sure that you are still offering the types of programs that they're needing and at the right scale. The strategic plan also helps with asset allocation and the like.
Great point.
You mentioned population. How does having a strategic plan in place help agencies better serve their clients in those populations?
It's having a focus on performance improvement and outcomes measurement that helps to inform the strategic planning process. And you also want to have your clients, your stakeholders involved in the process where possible, gather information from them, and certainly have your staff and board involved in the planning process.
Absolutely agree.
How do you get staff engaged and on board?
I think that when you get staff bought in from the beginning, it makes such a big difference in what you end up with. I think a big piece is making sure that people understand that this isn't just a document you're writing and you're putting in a drawer and never looking at again. Everyone's obviously busy in their day-to-day. But when the team really knows that, hey, this is actually going to have an impact on my daily work, and here's the things that we're going to do that's going to make my job easier, that's going to allow me to serve my clients better, and they see maybe some small wins as you start to implement that, I think it shows the team that you're not just doing an exercise to do an exercise.
I think that's a really good question. It's that I've heard of some organizations where the executive director or CEO just decides to jot down some goals and create a strategic plan and boom, here we have it. That's not ideal. Or that they're working just with the board of directors. Whenever we're consulting with an organization and helping them to facilitate a new strategic plan, we develop a strategic planning steering committee comprised of both select staff and board members. And so you're really getting the input and vantage points and expertise of both of those groups. And it helps to make a more complete, realistic strategic plan that is tied into your operations and then the future goals that all of those individuals agree upon.
Those are great suggestions. Are there any other best practices that agencies should keep in mind?
I think one best practice is to make sure that you are not making the process so cumbersome that no one's going to be able to allocate the time to it. So think through when in the year are you even starting this process? Are you doing this in December when it's, budgeting, or July, depending on your cycle, and no one's going to be able to allocate the time to this? There's a lot of little things that I think can impact people's engagement, availability, interest in kind of getting on board. And then I think just reiterating having the right people at the table before you get started. I think it's easy to have just a handful of people top down get down the path, and then you share it out with the team and they say, yeah, that's great, but the reality on the ground is so different.
I'd agree. And I would also recommend just keeping your eye on the horizon. So many times when people get into planning mode, they're really just looking at the next 6 to 12 months. And the strategic plan does need to look out. 3 years these days is most often the time frame. But it's also really important that once that strategic plan is approved by the board of directors and is put in place, that you immediately follow up and write an annual plan. And that helps to operationalize it and take those 3-year goals and break them down into, now what do we want to get accomplished in the first 12 months? Who's going to be involved? What resources do we need?
Fantastic best practices. And I think one of the points that stood out to me there is, you were mentioning a second ago, Katie, is about buy-in, the good timing for these respective changes. One thing that we do hear from customers is that how these changes have affected them. So I actually want to dive in a little deeper, and let's look at clinician burnout and staff turnover. How can agencies address this in their planning?
It's so top of mind for everyone. We were talking with customers earlier today about this, and I think this has always been a challenge for our industry, but I think since COVID, it's gotten so much more challenging. And we see that even on the tech side and the software provider side, but certainly when you're doing the hard work of being a social worker, that is a tough job. COVID has made that harder. Caseloads are getting heavier, and regulatory compliance is getting heavier. So I think that there's a lot that agencies can be doing to help their staff, and I think none of these things are silver bullets. No one solution is going to fix this. Something that I think really matters is thinking about administrative overhead, and are there processes you can streamline for your team that maybe they're taking 10 hours, but you get feedback from the team and you realize a way that maybe it's making it electronic, maybe it's just changing some of the steps and who's involved. I think that caseworkers are spending an average of 8 hours a week at a minimum, which is an entire workday just on the admin side of things, and that's really challenging. I know that a lot of our customers, their staff are really moonlighting to finish that side of it. So thinking about the overhead and then really figuring out the ways that you can engage and invest in your team and make sure that they feel valued and appreciated. And there's just so many small ways you can do that to reward people for showing up and living your values, recognize them for their hard work, and empower them and involve them as you're building these things out, so they understand that you as leadership see the impact of your decisions on their day-to-day work.
No, that's good. And really also just acknowledging that burnout is a real thing. People are just struggling with it across the board. And, coming up with solutions that work with your team. I mean, obviously having, close involved supervision, providing them support, providing feedback, but, you may have wellness day or wellness activities, or offer, make sure they've got access to employee assistance programs and their own counseling if they may need it. If people are working remotely, you do need to check in with them and make sure they're still connected to the team. Some people, it's easier for them to work remotely at home. Others, it's still not. So making sure that you're having those connections and listening to your staff.
Yeah, I think that's a great point also, that it's not one size fits all for your team. Everyone's going to show up differently, get energized in different ways. And, we have some people on the team who are introverts and very much want, one-on-one time and attention. And then we have people that want to be in every single virtual happy hour and are absolutely energized by being with the team, showing up in costumes to events, and having space for all types of people on the team to engage.
And that's a wonderful shout out to how culture can play a big role in just some of the changes that happen in an organization. In thinking about some of the tools, what does technology or what role does technology play in helping social service agencies with staff turnover or burnout?
I think there's a lot of ways that it can play in. One is that administrative burden. What can we be doing to leverage technology to turn that 8 hours into 4 hours at least cut down on what the requirements are. Something that we think about in our software is, hey, is there something that's taking 15 clicks that should really take 3 clicks because all of these interactions add up. But do you have processes that are paper-based and people are filling something out, have duplicate entry in multiple places? Really kind of doing an audit of those processes and looking at where can technology be leveraged. And then there's also tech that can be used for employee engagement and kind of supporting the culture as well.
Definitely. And tying into strategic planning, I think it's really important for an organization to have a technology plan where they're assessing what systems are using now and how long they anticipate that they'll be in place and what are they going to be needing in the future. But this also ties in with the employees of assessing their needs and skills with the technology, because we can't just put something in and think that this is going to be the silver bullet that's going to cure all and save a ton of time. They need to be trained, supported, sometimes retrained, and we need to take all that into account so that when organizations do make this investment of time and money in putting new technologies or enhanced technologies in place, that it's a good fit, it's working, and people are able to use it.
That actually reminds me of another question that comes up with technology, and it's not so much the user, but the data, right? Mm-hmm. So when we're thinking about protected health information, what should social service agencies be aware of when it comes to the security issues they might face?
There's a lot. Obviously, the security of data is just so top of mind and absolutely critical for all of our customers. Cyber attacks are just going up at a really, really high rate. Healthcare is the #1 targeted industry for cyber attacks. So it's something that, one is just really making sure you're doing your diligence on the software providers that you're working with, but also making sure that you're training your staff and building out your practices to support that. Because if a software is secure, but someone leaves, something logged in and walks away from their computer at an airport or isn't using, the right connection and they're on a public network, it doesn't matter if you have the right security in your software. So there's a lot of really small things or simple things, I should say, that agencies can do to train their team and make sure that they have those best practices in place.
I also think giving people reminders about phishing emails that have viruses, do not click on them. Just be careful.
Yeah.
And if an employee leaves, that there are procedures for how you're going to lock them out. Deactivate their accounts, get any hardware back that they had, and that you're planning for that.
We've had so many phishing attacks that we stop, but we've been seen such an increase just in the emails coming into our teams. Mm-hmm. I, in our onboarding document, have a note, because often a phishing attack will be someone pretending to be the CEO, asking for something. I have a note in our onboarding guide that says, "Hello, I'm Katie, your CEO. Welcome to the team. I will never ask you to buy a gift card. Here's a list of things you will never see an email or a text from me."
That's a good idea.
This is a PSA.
I think I'll start using that with my team. Yeah. Thanks.
Fantastic. So you mentioned a lot of the potential risks. You talked about planning a little bit. Our secure system helps agencies maintain regulatory compliance. How does accreditation and compliance factor into that 2023 planning?
Well, accreditation is something that can be one of your strategic goals. And being an accreditation guru, I hope that it is. And it does tie into the compliance, whether it's with regulations or compliance with accreditation standards. We want to make sure that we have the tools in place to follow and comply with various standards, and that we have enough people involved in that process so that you're able to maintain your accreditation and other compliance. When it does come to accreditation itself, once the organization has become accredited, which can take a year or more perhaps, there is the expectation that they're practically maintaining their accreditation between their cycles.
What else should agencies consider when creating the strategic plan?
I think that really making sure that you are taking into account what you're actually going to have the resources to achieve and how you're going to get there. I think it's great to start with, hey, what is the big goal? Especially if you're talking, 5 years out, dream big, think about what the best future state is. But as you're working backwards, and especially as you're getting into the 1-2 year plans, be realistic so that when you get into it, you're setting yourself and your team up for success, and you're really thinking about, hey, we know this is what we're going to get. Are we actually staffing up, setting the right priorities, doing all the things that we can really hit all these goals?
I would definitely agree with that. And I would say making sure, again, that those goals are specific and measurable so you're able to track your progress, and it does tie into accountability. I would also just say that a strategic plan is never something that's written in stone. So having an annual plan, which you'll take out and be tracking progress with, is helpful, but then you can look back on your strategic plan and decide, are we still working down this path? Have regulatory items come up, changes, new programs been developed, and we need to make adjustments. So again, it's a roadmap, but it's not written in stone.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you both so much. Jennifer, Katie, we're out of time, but thank you so much for joining us to discuss this topic. Where can people go to learn more?
With us, they can go to accreditationguru.com, and we'd be happy to speak with them about their accreditation and strategic planning needs.
For us, they can go to kcare.com, k-care.com.
Thank you both so much.
Thanks, Jose. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.